Hey, everybody. I'm Greg Bosson, CPA and president of QuickBooks Made Easy for Nonprofits. And it is November 2021. It's actually November the 2nd. And here in Atlanta, we had an election day. And so I just voted. Anyway, so because it's November of 2021, it's time for this month's Quick Tip, the e-newsletter where I teach you something about Quickity books. So this is specifically about those of you that want to use or want to understand the billable feature in QuickBooks uh, if you have QuickBooks Online. Okay, I have another one for QuickBooks Desktop. But anyway, the billable feature is a feature that nonprofits may very well be interested in, especially if you have reimbursed restricted grants. Okay, so real quickly, let me just explain to you what I'm talking about, why you would need it, and then we'll get into the details. So first of all, I'm going to go to this little plus new. How you doing, by the way? Are you ready to learn? All right, because I'm excited about this. So when you enter a check or a bill or a credit card or a debit card, whenever you're paying for something, okay, either manually or through the bank feeds, when you're entering it, you will notice that there is a little column here called billable. All right. So people want to know what this is. Well, I tell you what it is. What it is by checking this box, and let me go ahead and check it here. Okay, I'm going to check this box. Anytime you're entering an expense, even from the bank feed, if you check that billable feature, what it does is it says, okay, I'm going to remember this expense for $20,000 because later on, I think you're going to want to put it on an invoice to whatever name is here. Okay, so, and this, my friends, is where you're supposed to put your restricted grants. So by entering your grant either as a customer or a project, doesn't matter which one, you will be able to basically assign this expense to this grant. And that's really helpful for reporting purposes. But in addition to that, if you check billable, you can actually create an invoice for all of the expenses that you've marked as billable. And that theoretically would be the dollar amount that you're requesting reimbursement for. Now, you wouldn't send that invoice to the grantor, but at least it's in QuickBooks, so it matches what you're owed. Okay, so it's a nice way of entering your grants receivable. Okay, people love it. It's really cool. But I need to explain to you how this works because if you don't understand how it works, your report's going to be screwed up. Okay. And it's just interesting. It's something to learn about. So again, here's the billable feature helpful for tracking your reimbursed grants. Okay. Reimbursable grants. So what I'm going to do is I've got this checked and and I should show you just in case. If you are a bank feed person, when you are looking at an expense, here's one right here, and you're about to add it, you see this little billable feature here. You can check the box. Same thing will happen. Okay. So just want to let you know that. Anyway. All right. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to save this. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run over to a little P&L here. I've got to refresh the P&L. And you will see that this P&L, this is just a standard P&L, but you will see that the P&L now has $20,000 in equipment rental. Okay, cool. Now, what if that's the only expense, it's the end of the month, and it's time to bill for reimbursement? Okay, now watch this. This is really kind of cool. So I'm going to go back over here to the home page. I'm going to click the plus new button, and I'm going to do an invoice. Okay, so I'm going to click an invoice. Oh, I need to see who I invoiced. Help for you. Okay, so I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do an invoice for reimbursed grants. Okay, so it's kind of neat because this feature will kind of track everything I've marked as reimbursable. So here's the one. I'll pick it. And do you see any expenses that I've marked as billable will appear right here? Okay. Now, if I click add, it's going to add them to this invoice. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to show you why the billable feature is kind of weird. Okay. And how to fix it. You may have seen this problem before. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now I'm going to go back over to my P&L. I'm going to refresh the screen, but before I do, here's $20,000. Now I would expect to see $20,000 in income once I saved that invoice. I got to refresh the screen. I'm going to refresh the screen. It's going to rebuild the report, and now equipment rental is back at 0. So I want you to see what it did. I'm going to click on this, and you'll basically get a transaction report that shows you, here's me putting the $20,000 in. What did the invoice do? It pointed the income against the expense account. Okay, so that's what happens when you mark something as billable and later on invoice it. If you don't turn on a preference feature, we're going to talk about it in a second, it's going to point the revenue to the same account that the expense went to. So then when you look at your P&L, you won't see your expenses or your revenue. They'll be netted against each other. Not good. Okay, and so is there a way to address this issue? Absolutely. So I'm going to go to the gear and I'm going to go to account and settings. There's a couple things you need to do. The first thing you need to do is you need to go to where it says expenses. And you see this thing under expenses, bills and expenses. And it says here, make expenses and items billable. This is on. That's why I even got the ability to check it. If you don't use the feature, you can just turn it off. But I'm going to go ahead and click this. But while it's on, you see this thing here? Track billable expenses and items as income. Okay. If this is turned off, it won't point the invoice to an income account. It'll point the revenue to the same account as the expense went to, in this case, equipment rental. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, where did I put that? Where was I? I lost myself. Let me go back in here. So account and settings. So instead, what I'm going to do is I am going to check the box to track billable expenses and items as income. Now, you have the ability to put all of the billable expenses to the same income account or different income accounts. Usually you'd want them to go to the same income account. In other words, I bill this foundation for postage, travel, printing, but I all want it to go to foundation revenue. So I'm just going to pick single account. So if you mark this, now when you enter a transaction and mark it as billable, later on when you invoice it, the revenue will go to an income account. Which income account? I will show you. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Then I'm going to go to advanced. And under advanced, you see this billable expense income account. This is where you tell it what that single account is. I'm going to go ahead and click it. I'm going to click the drop down. It creates a billable expense income account. So if you didn't know this, then you'll get this weird thing called billable expense income, which doesn't really make sense for the world of nonprofits. So instead, I'm going to put it to foundation grants. That's usually what your reimbursed expenses go through, either that or government grants. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click save. And then I'm going to click done. All right. So now I'm going to enter a new expense. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and actually, you know what? Yeah, I'll go ahead and enter it the same way. I'm going to go to an expense and I'll enter it to the same dude and I'll put it to equipment rental. And I'm going to mark this one for $100,000 because I really want you to see how obvious this is. Okay. I'm going to point it to that same grant, Help for You, and I'm going to mark it as billable. Okay, and class, I'll put it to the Guidance Center. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now let's go back to our profit and loss. Okay, and there's our $100,000. Okay, now when I go to do an invoice, got 15 different things open. I'll go to plus new. I'm going to do an invoice, and I'm going to put Help for You. There's our $100,000. I'm going to add it. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and just save it. You'll have more than one. You'll probably have a ton of them. But anyway, I'll go back to the profit and loss. I'm going to refresh the window, and let's see what it did with that $100,000 on the invoice. It put it right up there. So that's pretty cool, I think. Anyway, so if you stayed for the end and you like the way I teach, please come sign up for and come to our webinar next week. Well, if you're using the online edition, you'd want to come in 2 weeks, okay? So on November 16th, 17th, and 18th, we're having our QuickBooks Made Easy for Nonprofits Fundamentals 3-day webinar series. It's 2.5 hours. Don't worry, we'll take breaks. We're going to have lots of fun. There's going to be music. We're passing out drugs. It's going to be great. If you click on this, go to QuickBooksMadeEasy.com, click on this, and you will see what's available for day 1, day 2, and day 3. And it costs $249. Okay. And if you go through your state association of nonprofits, we partner with about 30 of them. You can probably get a discount. Okay. But anyway, it's $249 for all 3 days, which I think is a good deal. Okay. And if you're like, I don't want to do that, I just want to learn about restricted grants and nothing else, we have a webinar on that too that we're doing with GrantStation on December the 9th that you can sign up for, again, at our QuickBooks Made Easy website. But we're going to cover restricted grants these 3 days as well. All right. I think that's it. Have fun in your Quickity books. See ya.